So philosophers don't do a lot of good, detailed, interesting stuff in between, but they help us lay a foundation. They help us tie it all together into a worldview. And he gives this definition of a worldview as a network of presuppositions, those most basic convictions we all have about reality, about how we know what we know, and about how we should live our lives. And so that's the definition that he gives for worldview here. And he says, in terms of all experiences, it's all related and interpreted through that set of our most basic convictions. And then sometimes we run into things that fall outside of that. And that's what we talked about with Nancy Pearcey book, Finding Truth, is sometimes people try to build their worldviews and things fall outside the box, and they close the box shut, and those things get lopped off, and those things don't exist, or that's just an illusion. Those don't really exist in the world, and so we can ignore those. Meanwhile, other people are getting more of the octopus tentacles inside the box.
Yes, yeah. Her point is, if it doesn't fit into our worldview, we kind of cut it off, right? We lop it off and close the box.
Right. And unfortunately, Christians don't have that ability to do that. We have to get everything inside the box, because we say God made everything, so that includes everything. And so we can't leave things that exist outside of the universe, maybe outside the universe, but we don't know about those things. But everything inside the universe, which includes everything. So dog toys and murders all have to fit inside that box.
Yeah. And so he says that worldviews are a package deal, right? A worldview is a network of presuppositions. Those, most basic convictions that we all have about reality, about how we know and how we should live. It's in terms of them, then these things, that we evaluate our experience and everything else. They help us tie together all of life and make sense of it, to understand beauty and justice and human dignity and logic and science and the meaning of life and everything. So our worldviews help us to tie everything together, to help us to give us, at least from our perspective, based on our worldview, some understanding of the way the world is.
Right. And it's important to note here, too, that, even your most basic person who hasn't thought about these things in those grandiose terms is still operating within that. They have lived experiences. They've built things. There's a consistent-ish nature to how they operate in the world. They get up, they go to work, they come home, they watch TV, they fall asleep. Even within the scope of doing those most basic things, if they only exist to work and then come back home and watch TV and fall asleep, they're still operating with some of these basic understandings that they live the world by and see the world by. Well, there's nothing that really happens. I'm not that important. So as long as I continue to make the widgets at the factory, I can come home. And what's most important to me is watching TV, my favorite shows. And why are those my favorite shows? Because they seem to inspire me to a life of beauty and external heroics. But I'll never live that way, because I'm not good enough. I'm not like the people on TV. And so I have to continue to go into work and make my widgets and come back home and live vicariously through them. Even there, that person is still operating in a worldview, even if they're not saying, okay, well, what is my ethical epistemology occurring here? It's still being realized out in how we're living. And that's a foundation where we can talk to other people about. And so that's what he's trying to kind of make that point with here.
Right.
All right. So he says, that's why I said a worldview is not tested by natural science. You don't test your ultimate commitments by natural science, because natural science also rests upon the commitments. Is the world real? The Matrix, the Hindu view of reality. All things are an illusion. Spiritual worlds. Is there an evil genie? All those things are kind of claims against a natural worldview. And so even coming in and interacting with the Matrix, or you're going to spite the evil genie by writing a book about him, you're still operating with a further back commitment to something that you're relying on natural sciences for. You're communicating. You're writing that book, even to if it's to the evil genie, even if it's to you that you're writing about, so that you can feel good about yourself in that way, and you're going against the machines or the genie or what have you. You're still taking a step back from the natural sciences, and you're able to look at it, even if you believe it's all an illusion. The very methods of natural science, though, depend upon a particular view of reality. Your network of presuppositions tell you the nature of science, the method you use in science, and how to interpret science. It's not tested by science, right? Can you come up with a all-encompassing view of science that also includes science? Nope, because science is just the method. Well, how do you do a scratch test on the method? How do you distill it? How do you put it on a rocket and shoot it in space to see if it's still true on the other side of the moon? The method, not the ideas of that method. It's only in terms of those fundamental presuppositions that you can do science. If you hold to those, if you believe that there's an intrinsic world, that it can be studied, and if it can be repeated. And that's something that you might see in a lot of debates of having this Humean flaw of saying, well, how do you know what's true today is what's true tomorrow? Yeah, for the past 100 days, the sun has come up. But do you know? How do you know, other than, well, it's just a really good guess that it's happening?
Yeah, it's yeah. So what he does next is kind of give us an illustration of this to kind of help us understand. Let's say that somebody else has a totally different worldview. Well, they may not come up with the scientific ideas that it seems obvious to us. He uses Plato, for instance, right? He said Plato believed that the most ultimate reality was not the physical world, right? It was the realm of ideas or forms. And so if you see three ducks, Plato would tell us, then you must have an idea of duckness, of which they are, instances of this idea of duckness. Okay, so where did the idea of duckness come from? Well, it's not just in our mind. Plato said that the idea of duckness exists outside this world. It's not part of time and space. So there must be a realm of ideas or forms that are beyond this world. That's what Plato argued for, right? So the real reality, we might say, is this the ideas or the forms that exist outside the physical reality. Mm-hmm. Well, now, what does that do with regard to that? Makes science a little bit more difficult to work through, right? If you have an idea. So now the basic reality isn't the physical world. The basic reality is some ideas, some forms that exist beyond the physical world. Right. And the physical world is just the shadow of those ideas. Right.
And so we are two shadows. And so there must be a more perfect form, a more perfect being, one that exists fully and encompassing outside of reality to give us our form. That form would be God. And he holds the perfect triangle, and he holds the perfect duckness, and he holds the perfect cat. And so when you get to heaven, you find you're standing face to face in front of the perfect triangle with a duck in front of it holding a perfect cat. So we get there standing before the all perfect being. So even with Plato, we can trace our lineage back to God there. But if you have a view of reality that ultimate reality is idea, not flesh and blood, here and now, time and space particulars, then you will not be an empiricist in your theory of knowledge. You will not say, we know what we know because of our senses. If ultimate reality is outside of time and space, then something that is in time and space cannot be the way that you know about it.
And so the point he's making here is that, we take for granted that science is done with a certain method and that sort of thing, but it's based on our worldview. It's based on how we believe things are. If we thought things were different, we had a different worldview, then we would come up with a different idea with regard to, what science is. Right? If ultimate reality is not the physical world, but it's outside time and space and that sort of thing, then how we know what we know and what we know would have to be different, if indeed that's what our worldview held to for us. Right. And so that's the point he's trying to make here, is that the worldviews kind of push us in a particular direction. And even, to do science, we have to make assumptions about the way we believe the world is, right? He says, understanding worldviews has everything to do then with our defense of the Christian faith. Because worldviews are a package deal, he tells us, you need to understand that your Christian commitment means that you have made a commitment for all of life. And it's a package deal. So, each part is part of the whole. So everything you think and everything you do is tied to your Christian commitment.
Right. We see this a lot too, this type of like different type thinking when we talk about like new age ideas and crystals and Reiki healing and kind of all these stuff of astrology. Things have different vibrations and it wards off or it changes you in a different way, in a different fashion. And so having, this is just a crystal. I can find a whole bunch of them in a cave underneath a town that is always getting flooded. And so your claim to have this type of crystal ward off the evil elements doesn't seem to be helping them. Oh, well, if you have too much of them, and so that changes the whole makeup, and so you need some bad luck in your life in order to have the good. And so but how do we talk to those type of people? How do we talk to, your white woman friend who tells you that Venus is in Nutrigrade or whatever it might be, and say, well, no, the planet's just out there. It's 93 million miles away, and it'll come around again. And she goes, yes, that's very important. And so when we have these commitments, we have to realize that there are basic assumptions that we make going into it. And so talking and saying, well, here's my my concluded outcome. We have to match it up with yours, and they might say, well, that's not what my concluded outcome is. And so that's why we need to take a look at these kind of basic assumptions, these basic beliefs, to kind of get to the root, and then from there we can go forward. Because even with New Ageness, you're still operating on a if then. So you have if I do this, then this will happen, or if I do too much of this. And so we can still point to flaws within kind of the New Age understanding, and see if we can get agreement there. But I'm sure we'll talk about internal and external critiques. And so that's might be where we're going next. But you need to know as well that the challenge of your Christianity at any point implicitly challenges everything you believe as a Christian, and vice versa as well. When the unbeliever's worldview can be attacked at one point, the unbeliever's worldview is endangered at all points. Understanding what worldviews and philosophies are enables you to do a lot of internal destruction within the unbeliever's worldview, as we'll go on to see. Look right there, internal critiques. It's one of the two-pronged attacks that we can have as presuppositionalists right there. All right. And so that's the end of chapter 6. So you are all now philosophers, and you were actually all philosophers before this started, but you're even better informed philosophers now. So thanks to Against All Oppositions by Greg Monson.